Another high-rise fire in Melbourne. Let's have a look. It looks like it's just not stopping. In Melbourne, we've got a high-rise fire fueled by combustible cladding on Spencer Street. Let's have a look at some footage that someone has shared here. Let's just watch this. So you can see here it's going up the outside of the cladding. Seems very familiar, doesn't it? Very familiar, like it's happened before. And this is just, it's probably going to come more and more to the forefront, these issues. You know, Opal's really brought it into the public realm. The media's talking about it. You've had this happening, a couple of years ago down in Melbourne before, again, and it's to do with an aluminium composite cladding usually that's put on the outside of these buildings. Happened with the Grenfell Tower. Now, when you're specifying as an architect, you can spec one that has a core inside it. It's aluminium with a core on the inside that has fire retardant properties that won't burn. But you know what the difference is? It costs a little bit more. So you know what people change? That exactly. So that, the builder or the contractor or someone will go, oh, I can get this product from China. It has this stamp, so it says it's compliant, and it's cheaper. It's half the price. Let's whack it on there. And we get these issues. So let's have a read through this. So emergency order will prevent residents of Melbourne apartment complex from returning to their homes after a fire spread up the side of the high-rise building. So we're having in another state, another issue with a high-rise, another group of people evacuated. This is just, it's just getting worse and worse, guys. This is just getting really, hang on, my glasses are falling apart. This is just getting even more concerning for all of us here. What's going on? So the fire started on a 22nd floor balcony of the 200 Spencer Street building shortly before 6 a.m. and spread up the exterior of the building to the 27th floor, firefighters believe. Now this is really shocking. You've got to be concerned with this type of thing, that if it starts going up the side of the building, fire spreads vertically. This is dangerous. Why is this happening in the 21st century? It looks like we're getting a repeat of all of these instances and fire disasters from centuries before. My wife actually did her thesis on this, and we're looking at getting her to publish it out again. And as part of her thesis, it was in high-rise buildings. She looked at just the historical progression of the legislation. So every time there'd be a disaster, there'd be new legislation. Every time there'd be a disaster, there'd be new legislation. She actually was interviewed by ABC regarding the Q1 tower down on the Gold Coast, where they've got issues as well with the fire escape design not being compliant with legislation and somehow getting through. So if you'll be able to look that up. I'll find a link for it if you're really interested in that interview. But it just shows you this is a problem in our industry that has been here for a while. So 15 fire trucks, 2 ladder platform trucks, and 60 firefighters were used to extinguish the fire, which was brought under control at 6:49 a.m., which just shows you how good our response units are, which is fantastic. I wonder if this firefighting force in Victoria, if someone can know in the comments, do they ban white men from joining their fire brigade? I wonder. Metropolitan Fire Brigade Chief Officer Dan Stevens said firefighters believed the building was clad with similar materials as London's Grenfell Tower, in which 72 people died in 2017. So, my understanding is, with aluminium composite materials, because it looks good. It looks pretty, it's cheap, it's easy to put in. You literally just have to stick it up. It's quite resilient. And the real issue is as well where you can get the ones where they will put a honeycomb of aluminium between it, and it's actually the glue in between that burns. So he said fire investigators would determine how the blaze started and spread. I can't speculate at this time. What I can say is there's evidence of external fire spread. Yes. Sprinklers were activated on four floors of the building, and firefighters said it was unclear how badly the apartments would be damaged. It's good that they activated, isn't it? Residents will be allowed to return to their homes for a short period to get belongings and medicines, but will be barred from staying there for 48 hours until fire safety systems are repaired and in working order. Okay, that's reasonable. You know, once you've got these fire safety systems and some of them get damaged during the process, just to kick in, because their job is to keep people alive. That's why we have these systems in place. But it's just crazy this is happening again and again. The order was issued by City of Melbourne after 150 people were evacuated earlier. A man in his 20s was treated for smoke inhalation at the scene, but by paramedics and taken to the Royal Melbourne's hospital in a stable condition. Fantastic. That's good news that when this happens here in Australia, we're not having deaths. So, you know, you can be confident that our evacuation systems in these buildings are working, hopefully, or evidently. The City of Melbourne has said about 200 people had visited a relief centre set up in the Melbourne Town Hall. Lucky to get out there. Caroline and Clem Edmund are among those evacuated. The couple were holidaying in Melbourne from Victoria Harbour, south of Adelaide, and had booked the 14th floor apartment through Airbnb. Now, this is an interesting thing. This is something that might not be highlighted in this article, but depending on the classification of the building, so if you've got permanent people living there as opposed to people in an Airbnb short stay accommodation, there's different legislations for the fire code and different requirements. And the problem is that these long-term apartments, owner-occupiers essentially, or long-term letters, are usually have a greater understanding of the building and more familiar with the building, so the fire requirements are different to those in short stay accommodation, like a hotel. But with Airbnb, we're changing these long-term apartments into hotels. So people will build it, throw it up, classify it as a long-term stay, and then flip it to a hotel and get around some of the fire legislation, which can be quite expensive and is quite concerning. So that's just a little side note that will be interesting to see how that progresses. We've heard the evacuation order, and we sort of took off basically in the clothes we were in. Yep. The flames were quite fierce when we got out and had a look. You could see them pouring out of the windows upstairs. It's been quite overwhelming. We just want to go home. Yeah, that's one way to ruin your holiday, isn't it? It definitely is one way to ruin your holiday. Mr. Edmonds said there was a strong smell of smoke when they were allowed back in hours later to collect their belongings, of course. Just long enough to grab our stuff really quick and get out. That's all we had time to do, Mr. Edmonds said. There's a little bit of smoke damage around in the corridor, on the mirrors, and the lighting is all emergency grade lighting, so you can't see a lot. The fire guys were telling us that above us there's either smoke damage or water damage, and some places are uninhabitable. Well, yeah, you can have a look here. They're investigating what happened. Yeah. So, some residents refused to leave, which is stupid. You know, it's a material possessions. They can burn. You want to live. About 150 occupants were evacuated from the building immediately after the fire broke out, but firefighters said some had refused to leave. We're a bit concerned about some of the occupants who had resisted our advice to evacuate the building. Darwin in action, evolution in action, Darwin laws in action. He said firefighters had discovered some residents had put plastic over their smoke alarms to stop them going off while they were cooking. Yep, there you go. That happens. That definitely happens. We're really concerned about some of the fire safety aspects we're seeing. Adam Dilmape, the MFP's acting deputy chief officer, said the building would have been assessed by the City of Melbourne and other agencies to determine compliance with the building code. But he said MFB disagreed with the level of cladding allowed under current building codes. Yeah, well, it's an issue. Maybe they need to start sprinklering the outside of these buildings. Our view is that any building with an effective height over 25 meters shouldn't have cladding on it at all. What the? Okay. I haven't heard that one before, but sure. The ABC understands that the City of Melbourne has issued 2 show cause notices in July and October last year to the property owners over concern the cladding was combustible. Okay, so they were aware that this cladding was an issue. But who cops it? Who cops it? It'll probably be body corporate and the owners. Under the notices, owners were asked to provide why the cladding should not be removed, sorry. why it should not be under the show cause notice. Well, because that is not a cheap activity, going up the whole side of a building and removing the cladding. And you need that cladding. It's probably part of the waterproofing system in a lot of these buildings, or at least a rain guard. What are you going to replace it with? FC, another product, heavier product, engineering implications, wind load implications. This isn't a simple thing. Modifications to fire safety measures were made, including the installation of additional smoke alarms, but the cladding remained. Well, so long as they're not covering up the smoke alarms with plastic, that should work. At least there was no one injured in this fire. A City of Melbourne audit of high-rise buildings found recently 51% had non-compliant claddings. The occupants are in shock. People evacuated from the building today told the ABC they woke up to a fire alarm and the smell of smoke. We thought that there would be a proper evacuation plan, but there was no plan. Nobody was there to direct. Mr. Swin Siwa, who was staying at an Airbnb rented apartment again in the complex with a woman and young children, said he did not hear any specific warnings beside the fire alarm. Yeah, because it's probably... I have to look into this. Is it an apartment building or is it a hotel? If you're renting Airbnb, you're not going to get the same level of service as a hotel, guys, for a fire evacuation. That's kind of what you're paying for, you know? Being inside the building, you don't know how bad it is or what's going on. We were kind of in shock with the little one, yeah. Aaron Duncan, who lives in the complex, said the fire brigade used a loudspeaker to tell residents to evacuate around 6 a.m. It is interesting to know the fire alarms probably not as loud as I thought it would be, he said. Michael Williams said he only heard the fire alarm after most of the residents had left the building. We didn't hear the alarm until about 15 minutes ago. We thought it was a few blocks down. He said, wow, maybe it isn't meeting the sound requirements that it has to. I then came out and had a look down and saw all the fire trucks and thought, shit. Yeah, it's been, yeah, okay, I've been recording enough. You can't really swear in the first few minutes of a YouTube video. YouTube doesn't like it. That's what I've been told. We'd better get out. It was pretty scary. I bet it was. The flammable cladding exactly where fire spread. Here you go. Oh, look at that. Right there. So a forensic building inspector said images of the tower's exterior suggested there was a line of flammable cladding in panels where the fire broke out. The building is extremely safe. It's around 90% made out of concrete panel construction. There's only about 10% of the panels. Sahil Basin told NBC Radio Melbourne. That's one of the advantages we have here in Australia, really, is that we construct our high-rise buildings out of concrete. And it's a lot harder for the concrete to burn. Essentially impossible, and for these buildings to come down. When you look at the World Trade Center and America, a lot of their structures were built out of steel, and they would protect them with spray-on coatings, and there was always a point of weakness, and still is in a lot of their buildings. But because we build everything out of concrete, you usually have time to get out, which is good. Because, I mean, the building's going to be fine. This is just stuff that's stuck on the outside, and sure, they've got to do some waterproofing issues if they replace it with something else. And it's not going to be cheap to fix, but it's not like a fire will cause a major structural issue as easily as with the steel buildings. They are sad exactly what the fire broke out. Okay, the MFB warns residents in high-rise buildings to exercise extreme caution on balconies due to the risk of fire spreading vertically through flammable cladding. You know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. They're going to ban smoke. You know, the state will come in and ban smoking from balconies. You won't be able to smoke on balconies, which would be terrifying for my mother, because I'm trying to get her to move into a little older 20, 30-year-old apartment with good brick construction, and she'll want to smoke. But yeah, they're going to ban smoking on balconies, I bet ya. Mr. Bashin, who is a general manager of Roscon, said it appeared the building's fire plan had worked perfectly. The fire occurred, the sprinklers came on, assisted with the MFB, the fire was doused. The Victorian government audit conducted after the Grenfell Tower disaster found flammable cladding posed a risk to 1,400 buildings. 1,400 buildings. Just think about that. Rectification works on those buildings was likely to begin in the next 18 months. Even removing cladding from every second story of these buildings could reduce risk by creating fire breaks, he said. Yeah, he's got a point there. But then at the top, at the gaps between the cladding, you may have water penetration issues. Building managers said building was fully compliant. well. The Neo 200 apartment complex was found to be fully compliant with cladding standards in 2017, according to a tweet from the building managers. While most of the building is not clad at all, where any cladding is used, it is compliant with VBA standards. Neo 200 was built by LU Simons Proprietary Limited, which also built the La Crosse apartment tower in Docklands, where fire raced up flammable cladding in 2014. Oh, look at that. I wonder who changed the spec, if it was or not. The Neo 2000 website describes the apartments as the very best in contemporary inner city living in a truly dynamic location on the western end of the CBD. Premier Daniel Andrews said he would wait for an investigation into the fire before making comment on the role of flammable cladding played in fueling the blaze. I'm sure you'll just, implement some new gender policy to implement. Maybe it's because there's too many men involved in construction. That's what it is, Andrews. You got to get gender equality in construction. That'll fix it. Can you tell I'm not a fan of Andrews? On the issue of Spencer Street, let's get the facts, he told. We may be able to talk more fully then. Sure, mate. Sure. Mr. Andrews said his government understood there was more to do following the audit of cladding in Victoria. These included both the fire response, inspections, the building code framework for the future, so we don't see any more of these buildings either built, wrong cladding used, wrong or misused cladding. That is in fact okay in nature, he said. I think the issue is to do with the way we procure projects. You've got to, if you're going with developer-driven, maybe design and construct, the traditional policemen of the certifier and the architect who would check these things are now employed by the builder. Conflict of interest. You don't have people observing the construction. We don't have a clerk of works or a clerk of works anymore on site. No one to check. And what happens? We get fires. We get issues. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this is going to be an issue? Will we have more of these occurring? There's, I've just been shared, someone commented on another video about some Opal Tower footage that was discovered of cracking that was covered up. So, I mean, I'm not surprised about any of this. I've seen a lot of dodgy work in buildings, and I've lost clients because I've gotten pissed about it. But, that's what you do. That's what you do. Let me know what you think, guys. When is this going to end? Will anyone buy a new apartment anymore? Should we have all the subbies having GoPros filming everything constantly, and then anyone who buys can see all the footage? Maybe that could be a situation or a solution. Please like, share, subscribe, ding the bell if you want to see my future updates, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye for now.